no metal slide.
Okay, so this video I'm going to go over how I build drawer boxes and install them. And this is not going to be a fancy video. This is not going to be something that's going to have fancy joinery like box joints, which by the way, I love. Dovetails, fancy drawer slides, etc. So this is going to be just a basic, mainly geared towards beginner, intermediate woodworkers that are just looking, or high volume woodworkers that are turning out a lot of product, which I typically do for the most part. So here we're just going to mill up our drawer boxes. Here, as you see, we start with, like most process, we start with a miter saw, jointer, table saw, planer, if need be, depending on the wood. And that's all preference. But the thickness is important because the thickness will dictate your next steps. So you want to have your thickness of your drawer boxes completely set before you move on to your next step. And that step will be to get your measurements for your drawers. So your drawer slides are going to be on each edge. So you're going to take two of them. Say if they're each an inch, that's 2 inches. You're going to subtract and plus 1 other inch for your drawer slide. So say if you have a 13-inch opening here, well, you're going to minus 3 inches essentially if you take those drawer slides. If they're drawer pieces, I'm sorry, and they're 1 inch thick each. Typically, they're not going to be, but just to make it easier to round off this number for you, you're going to minus 3 inches. So your drawer fronts and backs will be 10 inches, if that makes sense. So here we're just going to cut up our final dimensions here for our drawer boxes. And we're just going to use a table saw and also the miter saw to get to the final depth and width here. And that's all we're doing. Okay, so when I do drawer boxes, I like to put a groove in the bottom. So I use my table saw here. So what I normally do is I've cut about a 1/4 inch in depth here. So I set my table saw to that. But also I cut from a 1/4 inch, typically from the bottom up. So that way, I have a 1/4 inch space on the bottom. So that way I can, if I need to put brad nails or whatever in, I can. Typically you don't have to do that if you do this correctly. So I just put this groove in each bottom of the sides and the front and backs. The backs won't matter as much because you're going to cut that later. But right now we're just going to do it to keep everything consistent. So when we install everything, they're good to go. So that's all we're doing here. We're going to cut these grooves in the bottoms, and that way you can slide your bottom pieces, drawer boxes in. And also keep in mind you have to take that in consideration when you cut your 1/4 inch or whatever it is drawer bottoms, because you have to add that 1/4 inch from each side and also 1/4 inch from the back, front and backs, which will be a 1/2 inch all around. So here I'm going to use, when I install these, I like to do it this way. I like to have a little square, put it on my flat work surface here, and use this little square block here just to keep everything nice and straight. And I use another speed square here just to make sure that when I assemble it, it stays straight and square on the top. So we're just going to use some glue and some brad nails here. I like to use 18 gauge brad nails, and then later we'll come back and we'll countersink and put some trim head screws in just to hold these together. And you can cover them up with dowels if you like, or just a little wood putty if need be. Usually they're pretty small. But here also, if you take notice here, I like to keep the grooves facing upwards typically. You don't have to, but it definitely helps, especially if you're going to install the backs at the same time. That way the backs, when you cut the bottom of them, when you put them in, it lets the drawer the drawer bottoms slide right in. As you'll see later, we'll illustrate that in a couple minutes here. But right now we're just going to keep everything nice and square. We're going to install and assemble. And just, like I said, we're going to use some glue, brad nails, and some screws later. Another thing to keep in mind with these, when you're building drawer boxes, no matter what type of joinery you're using, whether it be box joints, dovetails, or brad nails, or even pockets, you want to have your sides, your drawer sides facing. You want them on the outside of your front and backs. In other words, so when you pull that drawer open and close, you're not pulling your joinery apart. In other words, so if you have your drawer fronts on the outside of your left and right sides, as you're pulling that drawer constantly, you can pull that joint apart, whether it be screws, brad nails, glue, or any type of joint. You can kind of mess your integrity up with that. So like I say, you can use pockets, you can use any type of joinery for this, but you always want to have that principle of the sides being on the outside, if that makes sense. So here we're going to cut the bottoms here, so we don't need that bottom groove. And you don't have to do this. You could do this ahead of time if you like. Also, I like to do it this way in case you do install without being upside down when you do your drawer assembly. You can just do this and use this little cutoff as your spacer when you install the backs. But this is just makes it a little easier, makes it all consistent, and that way when I cut it, I know everything's going to be the same measurements. So now we're going to cut our drawer bottoms here, and this is just going to be whether it be 8mm or 1/4 or whatever the dimensions are, whatever you're using. That's all preference. But this will also dictate your grooves you cut in the bottoms of your drawer boxes earlier in this video. Your 1/4 inch. So typically, if your saw blade is about 1/8 inch of a girth, usually 2 passes will work fine. As you can see here, they fit perfectly. If you follow this principle and just take your time and just be cautious here, and also diligent when you cut these, that you're not overcutting things, not making the groove too wide, and also your box is square. If your box is not square or your bottoms aren't square, it definitely makes it hard to do this. So we're just going to put these together. So you could put the bottom in, the backs in after if you want, or you could do it ahead of time. I like to do it ahead of time, but this is showing you different options how you can install these drawer boxes. So you can see here, I'm just building these boxes, showing you different options, different orders. You can build these. It's all preference, and you'll find your own system. But this is the way I like to do them. I typically like to put everything together first, as long as I cut the bottoms of the back drawer box. So if I do that, then I can install the bottom slides easier. You can also use glue if you want here, but you don't have to. It's a little overkill, but I like to use glue sometimes, and then I'll put a screw in the back. We'll countersink it, as you'll see in a couple seconds here. We'll do that. But here they just slide in. As long as everything's nice and square, they come together nice, and this will make your assembly of your drawer slides later a lot easier if everything is straight and square. So here we're just going to run some countersinks and some trim head screws in to secure these boxes. And then we're going to flip these boxes upside down here, and we're going to do another countersink, and we're going to just put some 1-inch screws in to hold the bottoms, and that way they don't move around, especially if you're not using glue. You can use both. I like to use both depending on how big the drawer boxes are and how sturdy I want to make them. Okay, so we're going to be using drawer slides here. We're going to be using side mounted ones here just for the sake of this video. These are going to be the basic you get from any box store, you get from Amazon. So we're going to use our combination square here, and we're going to set our depth at 1 inch, and that will dictate our drawer face. That could be any thickness you like. It could be 1/2 inch, 5/4, 1 inch. For this video, this is going to be at 1 inch here, and we're going to just mark on the front of our face frame here 1 inch, so that way we know that's where our drawer slides will stop, and that's the front of our drawer slides will be. You can use side mounted, or you can use something like this. I like to use even dado cuts in the side of my drawer boxes and put a little wood slide inside your cabinet. You could do that. So now for these, we're just going to be using regular drawer slides, side mounted. It could be soft close or whatever, and we're going to be using, whether it be a spacer you can use, like I'm using here, like a thin spacer, clamp to your cabinet or box, and I like to use a level. The level is very important to me, because sometimes you can't hold that spacer. Sometimes can move around, especially because it's hard to mount it in the back. So you could use whether it be a quick clamp like this, a squeeze clamp. You just want to make sure that your spacer is straight, and the level definitely helps dictate that it stays nice and straight and level. So that way when you screw your drawer slides in, you know you're not going up and down. You're going to be nice and straight. And that's the idea with this. You can also, there's other ways you could do this. You can use other type of spacers. There's other companies that make jigs for this. This is for this instance, we're going to show just using a regular wood spacer here. Another option is using like a jig. The Craig makes one here, as you can see. This one's a pretty good one, especially if you're using a face frame or some kind of frame. You can use a quick clamp here. Craig even provides a clamp for this you can buy that can hold your jig in place on the face frame. Also, you can see here, I'm still using a level. The level definitely helps me keep everything, that drawer slide, straight from front to back. It's very important. This is very important because you want your box to slide in straight. You don't want it to go up and down. You don't want it to be rubbing. So this is very important to keep everything nice and straight. And just use, I like to use a smaller drill, an impact driver when I'm screwing these screws in. And then a lot of times I'll even hand tighten them. So now we're done that part. We've got our slides in their boxes. We're going to put the slides now on the rails on our drawers themselves. So I like to lay them face up on a flat surface and put my rails on the bottom of my drawer boxes. This makes it easier. You can also do it this way. You can use your Craig clamp for this also, and just extend it out, and then put your drawer box in. And this also, especially if you want to have a little space on the bottom of your drawer box, this definitely helps with that. But the first way I like better. It definitely seems a little more foolproof. But this is another option too, is using your Craig jig. This off. As you can see here, that was mentioned earlier, you want your side pieces to be on the outside of your drawer boxes here. This is very important. You can see here, this will help your joinery stay in place as you're constantly opening and closing these drawers. Okay, so now we're going to set up our drawer faces, or drawer fronts. This is definitely all preference. You can use flat piece of wood like this at the thickness you set earlier with your combination square. And your face frame, you want to make sure they fit flush. You can chamfer the edges. You can use when I install these, I also like to use double edged sided tape. It definitely helps. Some people even use a little bit of glue to hold it in, and then kind of set their where they want their drawer face, and then they'll use the card trick, which I typically like to use myself. I think it definitely helps here to space out your drawer faces correctly, and make sure you have even spaces and gaps. As you can see, I use this card trick a lot for most of my drawer installs for the faces. There's also some, I think, some jigs and spacers you could buy for this, but this definitely helps. And you'll probably see hundreds of videos of people using this technique. And I like to use this technique. It's definitely the easiest, whether we're using shaker style doors or regular doors or drawers for your faces. You always want to have some kind of way to make sure your gaps are nice and even and spaced out correctly. So for your drawer faces, this is going to be preference, depending on what kind of hardware you're using. So I'm not going to get too much detail with this. You can use different ways. Whether it be just find the center, you could cross measure, or use a tool like a jig above here. They sell this Wood River and other people sell your drawer face jig, or you use something like this for your tops and bottoms. But there's also other ones that you can find your centers from side to side and top to bottom. But this something like this is nice and simple, especially if you're going to be using just a knob or something like that. Now, if you're using a handle, which is going to require maybe more than one screw, then you probably have to follow the template that comes with that hardware, and that's all preference. But I try to keep that's typically going to be up to what kind of hardware you're using. So once I get the face on, I'd like to countersink from the backs, and then run some 1-inch screws in from the back just to hold these drawer faces on, and also help secure the box, because that's going to get the most wear and tear. That's when you're kind of pulling that drawer open and closed. You're going to be pulling that face off if it's not nice and tight here. And so for the knob, I like to use the knob typically. I just like to, and also this helps secure. I like to just screw it in from the back, from the countersink we did earlier, from the front, and then we just hand tighten it. So now these are pretty much done. I try to keep it simple, not overcomplicated. This is, like I said, geared toward more beginner and intermediate woodworkers, or people that are doing a lot of these types of builds. So that's about it. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks for watching. Go out and build something.